All right, welcome to America This Week, Convention Day 4. I'm Matt Taibbi.
I'm Walter Kern.
Walter, how are you doing? Are you exhausted yet?
I've gone through the sound barrier of exhaustion, and I'm exhilarated now. I'm almost brainwashed. People have been asking me if I'm feeling it. Those are people who are feeling it, and they want me to feel it too. And I ask them, "What's it?" And they say, the spirit. Here comes Donald Trump. Here comes 2024, victory, redemption, and so on. And I wish I could feel it. I'd like to. I can see that they are, though, and that's what's important.
Yeah, there's a lot of animation in here, I have to say. And even like attractive human beings, I can't say that that's been a feature of many Republican conventions I've attended in the past, but and people are stoked. They are very excited about this thing. It's very loud inside the venue already. We have a lot of stuff to get to before tonight. So basically the purpose of this podcast and our current plan is to kind of go through everything, all the news that's happened since yesterday. Then we're going to actually head over to the hall, watch the final event, and hopefully try to find a way to do a little recap afterwards. I don't think we're going to be able to do live look-ins because it's going to be a little loud in there. We want to be inside.
Yeah.
So we got to go through some stuff. First of all, there's been a lot of news that's been being released, sort of suggesting that the Biden campaign is already announcing that Joe is withdrawing from the race. It's not actually true. Like, Walter, what are those news stories actually saying?
Well, they all seem to go back to one source unless something has changed. Mark Halperin's tweet that they're considering leaving, that they probably will leave, that someone is actually writing this speech. He's going to withdraw from the campaign, but not the White House. He's not going to endorse Harris. They're expecting an open convention at which Harris and around 3 or 4 other candidates will have to compete. I think that's about it. A lot of this is coming out today, though, in an attempt, I think, to counter-program any triumphal feelings around Donald Trump's speech tonight. They're trying to create a rival mini-series, which can sort of break into the lead as soon as this convention ends and take over the American imagination for a while.
Yeah, so let's go through a couple of those things. There's also this story. The 34% of registered Dems believes Trump staged his own assassination attempt. But there's also from the same pollster, if I'm not mistaken, they're showing that Biden is actually winning the election.
Well, they're showing they're making a prediction. It's not an actual poll. It's a likelihood prediction, and they're saying there's a 54 or 56% chance that Biden will win versus a 40.
Oh no, that's you're talking about the 538.com.
Oh, there's another one.
There's a morning consult poll that has Biden ahead, essentially claiming that he got a 1-point bump
from Trump almost dying.
Yeah. So I'm actually curious, what do people think about that? Commenters, does anyone believe that poll? Because it's coming out the same time that 22 members of Congress told Joe Biden he's got to drop out because he has no chance of winning. So
Matt, my joke is that you can sort of order custom polls the way you can order a pizza now. And they call up and say, listen, I need a poll that shows Biden winning if he doesn't drop out. But I also need another poll that we can bring into Biden to show that he has no chance of winning to get him to drop out. And I need a third poll that shows if he does drop out, Harris beats Trump, and so on. We've seen every kind of poll, but none of them follow the mega narrative, which is Biden can't win and leading Dems are counseling him to get out of the race. So I say don't look at their feet, look at their belt line the way you do in football.
Basketball, yep.
Yeah. And if you look at their belt line and where their center of gravity is actually moving, unless we're being completely psyoped, as they say, then this effort to get him out would suggest those are not real polls, because who takes out the leader? I mean,
yeah, it's hard to believe. I mean, I would believe that it's closer than you think. I would believe that there maybe hasn't been significant erosion of Democratic support. But I have to believe that the situation is dire enough electorally, really, in terms of what they really project, both in terms of preference and turnout, that this is what's prompting all these calls for Biden to drop out of the race. Now, we had another big story today that Obama is calling for Biden to drop out, and let's just call up that story here in a second. And it's not like this is a huge surprise, because it's essentially been Barack Obama saying that through these other people. I think it's not terribly much of a stretch to say, but okay, here's the Daily Beast story. Obama joins Dems urging Biden to exit presidential race. And Walter, what do you think of the Daily Beast little taglines like "end times" here? Sometimes they're so ridiculous that it's funny, but anyway, that's their little thing. They're saying former President Barack Obama tacitly joined calls for Biden to end his re-election campaign, which lawmakers say could happen as early as this weekend. This is a consistent feature of almost all these news stories, from Halperin to this to there was another story I believe I saw in
Axios this morning.
Axios, yeah, they're all saying by Sunday. So according to the Washington Post, Obama is telling allies he thinks Biden has little chance but to bail out and save face both for himself and for the Democratic Party. And so the way it was reported was kind of interesting. It's like, not that Obama is making a statement to the newspaper, but that somebody has been empowered to tell the newspaper that Obama has bequeathed to them his opinion, which is sort of a funny way to do it. But what do you think about that news, Walter?
I don't know what to think of it. Increasingly, I think every day in some sort of air traffic control office, somewhere beneath, Arlington, Virginia or something.
Yeah, as Frank Zappa would say, underneath Virginia.
Right, underneath Virginia is a media situation room like the nuclear situation room in Dr. Strangelove, where they go, okay, here's the totality of attention units that are going to be available today in the American system. And here's a pie chart of what we think tonight's Trump speech will get and what we think this other issue will get, etc. We need to get at least 43% of that for us. What can we say today that will get it? And then they watch the needle go up and they go, it's not, hey, boss, it's not going up. You said we needed 43% of this pie chart. And then they go, well, so, say Biden has COVID. And it's not going up high enough. Well, say Obama, licensed someone to go speak for him. Oh, it started to go up. And that's where our news is coming from, because these are completely contradictory. Two things can't be true news days. Biden's up in the polls, but he's got to go. What? There was an Iranian threat against President Trump, and they called for increasing his security, but that day he had a lot less of it. I said the other day that I think this is the great American hard drive wipe, where they're just going to put in contradictory inputs to the point where we give up and say, hey, you guys handle it, okay? We're just going to go back to farming and, fixing our plumbing, and just tell us when it's over, okay?
Yeah, a lot of these news stories are just so completely contradictory, it's impossible to make any sense of what's going on, except the only thing we can infer is that there's confusion and unhappiness on that side of the ledger. So the program tonight is going to be fascinating. There will be, obviously, Donald Trump will be finishing, but there's also going to be Hulk Hogan is going to speak, and he's sort of towards the end of the lineup. Dana White is going to be talking. Tucker Carlson, known to both of us, friend to both of us, is going to be speaking. And we don't know what any of these folks are going to say. Before we get to the lineup tonight, though, there's a couple of other things we got to talk about, including one of the funnier media stories I've seen in a while. And I'm going to apologize in advance, folks, for what is surely the lowest tech attempt at a sort of recorded news footage. But I wanted to show you something. Walter and I walked over to the convention center a little while ago, and I want to show you first just something from inside the hall. So if you look closely, you'll see C-SPAN, you'll see Fox, CBS, even NBC is here, but there's one network that is not here. Really? We're going to show you what that is. All right, so if you could, that was very, very badly done, and I apologize, folks. But
that video proves only that you made a video. It doesn't actually contain the information that we're about to impart to you.
Right, yes, okay.
But we tried.
Trust us, we were there, and essentially what I'm saying is you can see that all these news networks are there. Fox is there, Newsmax, C-SPAN, CBS, Scripps, Hearst is there. But there's one that's missing, and it's this one. And I want everybody to listen very closely to the language that is used in the intro of this broadcast. This is actually a broadcast from Monday, but they've been doing this every night.
Good evening and welcome to MSNBC's special coverage of the first night of the 2024 Republican National Convention in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm Rachel Maddow. I'm joined here at MSNBC headquarters by my colleagues Joy Reid and Nicole Wallace and Jen Psaki and Ari Melber. We've got Chris Hayes under a desk here somewhere. On days like this, when it can feel difficult to wrap your head around all of the news that will just not stop unfolding, we know you have.
Hang on, I'm going to pause. I want everyone to look here. You can see people moving around in the background. Just take a look at this.
In the world about where to watch the news tonight, so we're grateful to have you here.
All right. So
should we reveal the secret?
Yeah, reveal the secret, Walter. Go ahead if you can.
Well, the secret is that even though Rachel says you have infinite choices into who you watch to cover the election, and she thanks you for choosing MSNBC, what she doesn't tell you is that by choosing NBC, you have actually chosen the one cable station that isn't in Milwaukee, that is using an LED screen to spoof the sense that it's in Milwaukee, and which opens with an aerial shot of the convention center taken by somebody else, suggesting they're there, but, masking the fact that they're not. They're somewhere in New York, and they're pretending to be in the heart of the action.
They didn't even say New York. They said
headquarters.
We're live from MSNBC headquarters. You got to go online and look that up, right? So they're if you turn on MSNBC, they are rolling. I bet if I turned it on right now, they're doing coverage with that stupid thing in the background.
Right.
And so that obviously the news does all kinds of things. They make editorial choices. They shade things. Like the New York Times cropping the photo of the assassination attempt photo, so that the flag isn't in the picture or whatever it is. That's different from this. This is actively kind of like messing with reality, and sort of pretending that you're there. I mean, I don't know whether it's an expense thing or.
Let's put it this way: they were actively deceptive to show an overhead shot of the place that reveals nothing is merely a claim to be there. You know what I mean? That the only usefulness of that shot was to make it seem they were in town. And they used the word Milwaukee as though it meant something here. Really, it's like the people at NASA Mission Control pretending to actually be on the moon themselves.
Right. And I mean, and how bad is this? Here's the New York Times. They did this story. Like the New York Post did a story. You expect that. But the New York Times does the story. Now listen to the way they do the story too. MSNBC's primetime coverage of the Republican National Convention has featured a typical TV tableau. Anchors at a desk perched high above the convention floor pontificating as the starred and striped political pomp unfolds below. But Rachel Maddow, Nicole Wallace, Jen Psaki, Joy Reid, and the rest of MSNBC's A-list anchor team have not been inside the convention hall. They were not even in Milwaukee. Instead, they were broadcasting from a studio in Midtown Manhattan, blah, 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 as a live feed was projected onto an LED screen. And then, the Times does its thing where it quotes a press ethicist and all this stuff. But for the Times to beat
it says the anchors in Manhattan have not claimed to viewers that they are in Milwaukee, but they led you to believe it. I mean, come on.
They open with an aerial shot.
Yeah.
And
they say in Milwaukee, but they don't specify. They say the convention is there, but they don't specify that they aren't.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely. I can't remember. Has there ever been something like that? I can't remember somebody pulling a stunt like that and getting caught doing it. At least, I mean, I seem to remember. I have a vague memory of one of the networks being caught superimposing an ad in the back of like a live shot that was in New York onto some.
Matt, it's literal wag the dog. Go watch the movie in which they, create footage of some, I don't know, Eastern European war and project it. It is wag the Rachel, wag the Maddow. Why are they doing it? And I'll tell you why. They're not welcome in the hall. I would suspect. I mean, they should go. Journalists should go where they're not welcome, but maybe they need to be adored 24 hours a day and will never go into somewhat hostile territory.
Yes. Yeah. Well, you should go. And by the way, they did go. All of the liberal networks,
right?
And I was part of this, and I think we were both part of this in 2016. Everybody was at the first Trump convention because they wanted to kind of gloat over the zoo that it was, right. and then now they're not showing up at this thing. So, what did they do? What have they been covering? Well, last night's coverage produced some kind of amazing moments. This is Joy Reid in a scene that has been much talked about here, to put it mildly. Let's roll the tape here.
Here's a question that I have on that. These two men are both elderly. Donald Trump is an elderly man who, for whatever reason, was given 9 seconds to take a iconic photo op during an active shooter situation. Weird day, but his survival of that and bouncing right back and going right to his convention is being conveyed in the media world as a sign of strength. This current president of the United States is 81 years old and has COVID. Should he be fine in a couple of days? Doesn't that convey exactly the same thing?
I'm sorry before we talk about what she just said. Look at the shot. Look at the moving people in the back. But
Yep.
yeah, go ahead. Yeah,
you think they're there?
Older than Trump to have gotten something that used to really be fatal to people his age. So if he does fine out of it and comes back and is able to do rallies, isn't that exactly the same?
I mean,
it's not exactly the same. It's not the same incident, but it's an elderly man coming through out of an illness.
It should.
Psaki just should have said
got nothing on that.
Joy, you're out to lunch. Get out of here. Get some rest. It's absurd what she said. It was ridiculous, but it seems to be her assignment to create a sort of boundary line for what can be said on television. Like, let's try this. Let's say that getting better from a respiratory illness is the same as surviving a headshot from a rifle. Okay. I think we can shave 3% of the people off belief that, it was a heroic day for Trump or whatever. If we say this, we can, so I think her job is really to go after the 97 IQ viewers and, pull them into a position. But Psaki looked almost insulted that she had to be there listening to it.
Yeah. So the humor for me in this, it's not funny because they shouldn't. It's such a ridiculous thing that it kind of deserves to be called out a little bit. But this clip of tape is really funny. I just want to show again. Look at the look on Jen Psaki's face. She's trying to figure out what she can say in response to this, and you can tell that it just keeps coming up snake eyes in her mind. She doesn't have a response, and it's just really funny.
The United States is 81 years old and has COVID. Should he be fine in a couple of days? Doesn't that convey exactly the same thing? That he's strong enough, older than Trump, to
Which
have
she starts calculating
that
now.
Used to really be fatal to people his age. So if he does,
but it never was. That's a lie too.
Rallies, isn't that exactly the same? I mean, it's not exactly the same. It's not the same incident, but it's an elderly man coming through out of an illness.
It should.
I wouldn't. I mean, just statistically speaking, I wouldn't say that COVID was as fatal to the elderly as a bullet going through the middle of their skull at high speeds. But what do I know? So they're not. Let's just say this: it's bullshit. But it's not even spread on real bread. It's spread on LED bread.
Right.
So it's a total, it's deception on top of artifice, and with a lot of bullshit spread around for seasoning and flavoring. And this is supposed to be the channel of the kind of liberal intellectual. This is the Cambridge, Massachusetts,
right.
Madison, Wisconsin, Berkeley, California channel. Why are they putting up with it?
I don't know. I mean, why they even need to go there? Like, it's just such a strange thing. Like, there are real things, plenty of them to you can criticize Donald Trump about it, and you can go after the Republicans about all kinds of things, but to get up there and say that, taking a rifle round off the head is exactly the same. I mean, that's the language. Isn't it exactly the same thing as people recovering from COVID?
But I like the idea that, okay, an assassination, a conspiracy to assassinate someone, a presidential candidate, is complicated enough. But a conspiracy to fake an assassination on yourself and then go on to have a heroic tableau afterwards is a conspiracy that it's a mega conspiracy. I would say it's orders of difficulty, 100 times harder. I have to get I don't have to just get a few people to shoot me. I have to get all these people to pile on and, carry me out and photograph me in heroic poses. I have to corrupt the photographers, the Secret Service, and the fake assassins, and somehow get a lot of the crowd involved in this conspiracy too. And people believe it.
Yeah, so this has been a theme all morning. There's been lots and lots of discussion. Did Trump really get shot? There were alternate ran a story. There have been Brian Butler, I think, had a tweet about this. That there's been speculation that maybe Pointer.org, which is a sort of press watchdog organization, it's not confirmed. That why haven't they issued a medical report? Walter, you and I have a slight disagreement about this. I think it's I guess mathematically possible that maybe he got injured some other way, although it doesn't appear that
at the exact place that he would have been shot with a bullet, it happens that a piece of glass flying off something got him. Wow, how lucky he was in that respect. And where's the rest of the glass? Who else got injured by it? Or where are the broken teleprompters and so on? As somebody who shoots rifles, the whole thing is crazy. And they can make it seem like the AR-15 is the most powerful weapon ever, next to the howitzer and the Gatling gun, belt-fed machine gun, but it's actually a rifle with a very small caliber bullet that goes at very high speeds and hits something like an ear. It goes right through it. It just pierces it. So I think they're relying on a kind of ballistic illiteracy, as they often do in these stories, to make it seem like his whole ear would have been ripped off. No, it wouldn't have been.
And my God, okay, let's even say the 1 in a gazillion chance that it was, shattered glass that got him or whatever. So, he got hit by something. Somebody got shot to death right behind him. He got rid of. He couldn't, even if it wasn't a bullet, he couldn't have known that it wasn't. And to make a big deal out of that is crazy. I think. So, but that's been all over the place. There's been calls for the release of the medical records, which I guess is a thing. You can call for that. But
let's see Biden's medical records. We haven't seen those for a long time. Let's see his testimony to her. There's a lot of things I'd like to see, including those medical records. But what are they going to say? The medical records aren't going to say a bullet hit. They're not fragments left in his ear. I mean, all they can say is what the wound was.
Yeah, very strange. I saw somebody posted a comment before that Glenn made an interesting analysis. I'm curious if anybody can tell us what that was. I didn't see that yet. So that Greenwald had an interesting take on the MSNBC thing. But that's nuts. So that happened. Hulk Hogan is going to be speaking tonight, and
we're getting real announcers. We can go from serious things like assassinations to and Hulk Hogan just walked by.
Right. Well, the assassination. So what's happened in the assassination attempt story in the last 24 hours? Has it gotten weirder yet?
Do I think it's gotten weirder?
Yeah.
It only gets weird because now they're onto the water tower and they're high or long distance shots of a shadowy figure atop this water tower. Matt, there's just no way to get to the bottom of it. It's going to get murkier every day. There are all these people in the various law enforcement departments, local and federal, that are contradicting each other. But I thought the weirdest thing that happened was that the Secret Service director showed up here at the convention hall last night and was, followed and some would say harassed by senators who wanted her to answer questions. I thought it was just the oddest thing I've ever seen that she should even come here. There's no real reason for her to be here. There's no operational reason. There was just an assassination attempt, and I think the least you could say is that the Secret Service hasn't looked very good in the wake of it. And so what's she coming here for?
Yeah, that was really weird, though. We heard the buzz that she was here last night, and I don't think we've had. Are there answers as to what exactly she was doing here yet? Not sure.
No. Yeah, it's mysterious. I found it kind of ominous, frankly. I mean, because she looked stone-faced and upset. Didn't stop to answer questions when she might have known that she was going to be asked.
Yeah. She was trailed by a couple of Republican senators who reportedly didn't behave themselves with perfect alacrity, but not alacrity, that's the wrong word, perfect decorum. But, I didn't, we still don't know why she was here. So that's crazy. And then another thing that happened last night that we haven't been able to talk about because we cut out or before this happened is the Vance speech last night. Now, we watched that together just before you went on Gutfeld last night, and we can talk about it in a second, but I wanted to share first this analysis of it that was also on MSNBC last night by Alex Wagner. Walter, I'm not sure that you saw this yet, so this is a funny one.
He goes on, he went a long sort of a paragraph at least about this plot in Eastern Kentucky where his 7 or 6 generations of his family are buried. And his hope is that his wife and he are eventually laid to rest there and their kids follow them. And I sort of understand the idea of sharing the burial plot, but it also it reveals someone who believes that the history that the family should inherit, and indeed the history that should be determinative in the story of the Vance family, is the history of the Eastern Kentucky Vances, and not the Vances from San Diego, which is where his wife is from and where her Indian parents are from. But in America, it doesn't always have to be the white male lineage that trumps, that defines the family history. That branch of the tree supersedes all else. And I just think the construction of this notion reveals a lot about someone who fundamentally believes in the supremacy of whiteness and masculinity.
Oh my God!
Sort of halcyon, revisitation of his roots, but it is
go to an Indian reservation and see how much they value where they live.
And America is a place for people with a shared Western background, and that is the idea of America. That is the nation of America that he wants to resurrect.
What?
Yep.
Okay, so on the one hand, it is the latest vogue that you do these land acknowledgments, where you acknowledge that, when you're giving a speech at a college or something, that some particular native people that was once their land and that it's unfairly occupied. But now we're not supposed to value land at all. We're just supposed to be creatures of the air or something. What was she trying to extract from all that? How did she get to white supremacy from that initial square? That's the kind of BS that's causing people to want somebody like Donald Trump right there. This tortured, academic, theory-based, reach, and exactly where she's going. As soon as she starts, she's going to get from this bear.
I knew right away. Yeah.
She's going to get from him wanting to be buried in a cemetery with his grandparents to Hitler. Like, how many, all roads lead to fascism, Hitler, white supremacy, and so on. And it's tiring. It's tiresome.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we got used to in 2020, in the summer of 2020.
What about Palestinians? The whole Palestinian issue is about being able to claim the land that your line grew up on from the point of view of the Palestinians. A very legitimate argument. People's attachment to places. I mean, what are we supposed to do? All float around inside an Apple headset?
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's a crazy thing, and it's obviously hypocritical, right? And it's a real reach. I mean, it would be one thing if there was some kind of real dog whistle involved. That there are ways to do that, with this whole if you're really trying to do white nationalism, I don't think you would just say, I have a burial plot in Kentucky and my family's lived here for seven generations and I'm going to be buried there and I have $120,000 in debt. Ha ha ha. Like that doesn't feel like a coded racist appeal to me, or if it is, it's so faint. It's an incredible reach on their part, and there was a kind of a similar. I'm actually looking for it now. There was similar apoplexy about his comment about having 19 handguns, or his Mima having 19 handguns, and I thought that was like, actually, first let's get into this. Walter, what did you think of the Vance speech overall?
I watched it in a distracted way. I was in a holding area, a green room at the Greg Gutfeld show, watching it on Fox News while, comedy writers were all around me talking to each other. So I can't say I got the best view of the whole thing, but it seemed like a casual, sincere, anecdotal speech that used a lot of family memoir to introduce him as a person. Remember, the job of this speech was to say, who is JD? Answer the question, who's JD Vance? Where's he from? And so on. He's also, let's remember, the writer or the author of a best-selling book about his youth. And so, and the thesis of this book, Hillbilly Elegy, is regional culture, basically, economic, family culture, and so on, and that he would situate himself in a particular place was natural for him. I know it's a fairly natural speech. It wasn't overwhelmingly great or moving, but to me, I was fine.
Yeah. So he's, I would say, not a particularly gifted speaker. That's all right. You don't have to be. He was fine. I think he was a little nervous at times. He was trying to appear genuine and talk about his roots, and there were some interesting aspects of the speech that, like, there was nothing at all about foreign policy in there. It was very, very centered on kind of the forgotten middle America. Well, like one of the most the hardiest reactions that he got was when he mentioned NAFTA, and there was a loud boo from the audience. And in doing that, he started talking about his family. There was an interesting moment when his mother was introduced, and she had problems with addiction, and so people are going to connect with that. And then he tells a story about his Meemaw and talking about how she died, and so this was the person who raised him because his mother was having problems with addiction. After she died, they found 19 loaded handguns in the house, and she had 19 handguns because she was old and frail, and she wanted to make sure that wherever she was within arm's reach of whatever she needed to defend her family. And look, it's a little wacky, right? But he kind of prepped the audience that she was a character, like she was a church going person who used the F word, and and then the whole 19 loaded guns thing. I as a person who's never owned a gun, never been interested in guns, I thought that line worked. It was an interesting, kind of interestingly crazy detail, and the crowd clearly loved it. But people were aghast in kind of conventional media.
That he was joking about his grandmother having this many handguns.
Yes, and I'll just show you. I mean, I wish I had some more video on this queued up, but here's just sort of a sample of the kind of thing that you saw. Gun extremists have a dream ticket. JD Vance brags about Mima's huge gun stash and RNC speech. And then they go through the whole thing.
Did he brag, really? I don't think that's the proper verb. I think he joked about it. I think he said, 19 guns is better than 10. He was trying to show that she was an old lady, a cranky old lady who couldn't move around and wanted a gun wherever she happened to be sitting, by her bed, in her TV chair, etc. He was trying to draw a picture of a certain kind of American family that, as a novelist, as a short story writer, I happen to know exists all over the place. Now, I can't fact check JD Vance's hillbilly elegy or his memories of his childhood. And I can't judge exactly by their income tax returns how poor they were and whether he has a right to complain about having grown up in, tight circumstances or not, compared to you or I. But all it was an attempt to break through and be authentic about his strange family of druggy, drunk mother, crotchety grandmother, and maybe in a community that was not that safe or even that sane. Because as I remember Hillbilly Elegy, he has a lot of criticisms of the place. He ends up kind of dumping on his home area as trapped in a cycle of self-pity. And the answer for him personally in the book is that he goes off and joins the Marines, learns discipline, and gets his act together. So I don't know. None of it was objectionable to me. I grew up in small town America.
Right. And
those stories are the least of it, man. I mean, what if he talked about a deer carcass would always be hanging in the living room when he got home from school, and Uncle Jeb would be skinning it and, watching porn. That kind of thing happens too.
Yeah. I mean, if I have a friend who was in the military, right? And talking about, we were sort of comparing what we do on the 4th of July, and I had a few little tiny firecrackers, and he said, well, my friends take out the mortar tubes and stuff like that. Weird stuff happens, right? I thought that line was really relatable, and if it had been, it wasn't a big come on the way Sarah Palin's speech in 2008 felt to me. Like, I was on the floor for that speech at the XL Center in Minneapolis, and the whole lipstick on a pig speech. This was different.
Here's one of my problems with American culture and political culture. He just told stories that if we saw them in a movie, we'd laugh at and we'd say, seem authentic and fresh and original and interesting, and portray a place and a time and a strata of society. But if he puts it into a political speech, suddenly we're supposed to analyze it as though he's advocating for this way of life or something. He's not advocating for anything. He's saying grandma was crazy, but I loved her anyway. And because he's a politician, we're supposed to rate whether or not he should be saying that because somebody else might want 19 handguns, or I don't know. The idea, and somebody in the comments said corn pop versus Meemaw. That's a fight I want to see. Well, Joe Biden does the same damn thing, and people, laugh at him. Some love him for it,
Well, right. With Joe Biden, although his reminiscences are becoming stranger by the second, and in fact, maybe I should find some of those while we get move on. But yeah, I thought that speech was, it was, I think, designed to underscore a core theme of the Trump campaign, which has always been aimed at the sort of victims of the last 30 or 40 years of deindustrialization, the export of the manufacturing economy, the middle of America that's kind of been left behind, and
and that's very real, by the way.
yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
it's very real. Let me tell you something real quickly. I took a long drive across America to write a book a few years ago, and I got to where sort of eastern Kentucky and northern Tennessee and southern Illinois and southern Ohio all kind of meet, the Ohio River country, coal country. And there's a place down there where I forget what it's called. You can stand up on the top of a rock and see 7 states at once. And it's kind of not the South, it's not the Midwest, etc. It's coal country, to use shorthand. To win the American presidency, you have to win that part of the country. Ohio, Tennessee, Indiana, and up into the Midwest, Western Pennsylvania, which is actually adjacent to the South if you really know America culturally. And JD Vance is the VP whose task is to win that part of America for Trump. It's not it's the same part of America that RFK, the original RFK, went to, in his attempt to relieve Appalachian poverty. And it's all important in politics, and it's a real place. And it tends to be a place that gets the absolute brunt of America's social problems that aren't urban, It gets what's called rural blight. We're used to urban blight, but it's a place where rural blight is an affliction. And JD Vance is here in the Trump world to go out and speak to it and get its votes and make promises and so on. And that's all it is. And all he was trying to prove last night was that he belongs there when he comes into those towns to make his speeches.
Yeah, and to get serious for just a moment, in 2008, when Sarah Palin gave her speech, this was the subject, that speech, which I immediately recognized was going to be kind of a transformative moment in the history of the Republican Party. Remember, the problem there was that you had John McCain, who was the absolute down the line, ultimate representative of like the national security state Republican. He wanted to not only continue to prosecute the war in Iraq, but he had this very expansionist vision, and he was very much a traditional Republican on the economy too. There was nothing in the platform that was designed to say, the last 30 years of American economic policy have been disastrous for middle America. Free trade, NAFTA, Trans-Pacific Partnership, whatever, the financial collapse, that's the fault of big banks in New York. He didn't say any of that stuff. And that was part of the reason that I thought that the Palin phenomenon was kind of phony. Mm-hmm. But remember also, there was a tremendous amount of criticism of McCain for picking Palin because they thought it was courting this angry middle American base that was sort of illegitimate in some way. It was the subject of a movie and a book. Remember Game Change? And the sort of crown priests of conventional wisdom, Halper and Heilemann, right? Like they centered on that moment as this terrible moment, an error of judgment within the Republican Party, that they picked this ignoramus from Alaska. Now, I was very critical of Palin too myself at the time, but not for that reason, right? Like what that election showed was that there was this thing happening within the Republican Party. There was a huge, disaffected, angry base that was not being spoken to, and the old appeal of the old Republican Party it wasn't working. It no longer resonated, and it was in a way foreshadowing what came later. But Palin just didn't. I don't think she articulated that the sort of populist, anti-establishment message the way that subsequent people did. So Vance, I think it was much more convincing in terms of that. He talked about the devastation that NAFTA had caused, the lack of jobs in the community that he grew up in, that he had to get out, goes and serves his country, right, in the Marines. That was more believable, and it was less of like as I said, less of a come on, and more in sync with the actual ticket, right? I mean, it wasn't enough.
But Vance's speech was also about upward mobility, okay? Because the thing to remember about him is not just that he came from Meemaw's backyard in rural Ohio, but that he went to Yale Law School, and that he worked for, Peter Thiel, one of the premier venture capitalists of Silicon Valley, and that he now has his own fund, and then he opened his own fund, and that he became vice president. And so they were tracing that arc as a kind of, apogee statement of the American dream, which I suppose it is. I think what he was trying to say, and all political speeches are political speeches. They have a certain, saccharine or artificial or exaggerated element, was, I see your route to doing something like I did being cut off, not that you're going to get where I got. Maybe I'm an extreme case, but he was talking about economic mobility for a part of the country that, and for not just a part of the country, but a class in this country for whom it is endangered. He talked about the price of housing very specifically. Listen, if he was a Democrat, we'd consider it a labor speech. We'd consider it a populist speech. We'd completely frame it differently. He kind of resembles a Democrat, frankly, in some ways.
Like in terms of where he's from, or
where he's from, his themes. He's talking about working people. You might not believe it because he's a Republican, but he's addressing what were traditionally Democratic voters.
Right. Yes. And that's a great point, because remember, the whole theory of the Bill Clinton campaign in 1992 and 1996 was about getting those voters. It's the economy, stupid. We're going to do enough policy-wise to move in that direction, to reorient the party. I didn't always at that time agree with some of the things that they were doing to try to get those voters, but that was the strategy back then. Now, the same party is saying it's illegitimate to court those voters.
I hate, okay, my relatives are from Ohio, full confession, or, they're from Akron, Ohio, not one of the glamour spots of America. A lot of them worked in or around the rubber industry.
Akron is depressing, man, because that place used to be a powerhouse, and
yeah, it was a little Detroit. It was the home of Goodyear, Firestone, these great American tire fortunes. And it's down on its luck, man, like most of those towns. And when people start this theme of the angry white person, I'm always offended, because I say, we don't talk about the angry Hispanic and angry black person. We actually address what are their grievances, and not their psychiatric condition or their emotional condition, as though it's unjustified. And I don't know that they're angry. They're just disappointed, and they're desperate, and they're poor, and they want something else, and they can't afford a house, and their job doesn't have real benefits, and they don't get a real pension, and they're worried. What they really are is worried. And politicians come coasting through those states every few years, making all kinds of promises. The jobs are coming back, et cetera, and they don't. And so why should they not look again, maybe in an endlessly disappointing quest for some sort of, restoration of their middle class condition, to this guy? And he's one of them. And I think he's genuinely one of them. I hesitate to say this, but somebody said it already in the comments. When you looked at his mom, you knew he was telling the truth about where he came from.
Yeah, you actually said that to me last night in the green room. Yeah, absolutely right. This is something that I reported on. I was in Iowa in the last election cycle. I met a family, a couple, that they were Bernie supporters, and they were sort of trolling at an Amy Klobuchar event. I believe it was is it Winterset, Iowa? It's the home of John Wayne. I'm trying to remember the name of that town. But they were saying, look, people rolled in here in 2000, 2004, 2008. They kept saying that things were going to get better. Like, this one farmer had been complaining about the same visa issue, like for foreign workers, and kept being told by one candidate after another that things were going to be fixed, and they aren't. And then eventually they decide that no politician is going to tell them the truth about anything. And this person who I talked to had to move off his own farm and go to work for Walmart, and was saying, look, if you work at Walmart, when the boss of Walmart says something's going to happen, it happens. So you start to listen to somebody like Donald Trump, because he's not a politician. He's somebody who does something else. And this person didn't like Donald Trump, but he was just explaining why the appeal is what it is, and it makes a lot of sense, I think. But
JD Vance's message really last night was, besides "I'm JD Vance and here's where I came from," is don't despair. Help is on the way. My part of America. Now, whether that's a lie, whether it's disingenuous, whether it's impossible to make good on, I don't know. But that was the message. And that he dressed it in these authenticating details like 19 handguns. You can get outraged about it, but I find it charming because I happen to know it's true.
Right. Yeah, of course. And come on, how bereft of a sense of humor do you have to be to go on air and get all frowny faced about it? I don't know. It's just crazy. So we can't let this go by. We mentioned last night the BET interview with Joe Biden, and we didn't watch the whole interview because it got pretty weird at times. So let's just watch this clip.
He could. And one thing does change. It's not an excuse and explanation. I would ordinarily be going through black neighborhoods on the foot, working through the neighborhoods. I have a tradition. I close every campaign, no matter what campaign, going into the projects and going down the east side. And hey, Joe, well, how you doing? They would, well, just because they were friends, let them know I'm still there. We can't do that now. Not because of the black community, because it's too dangerous for me to be out walking unaccompanied. So what I'm doing now is trying to keep in touch with as many of my black constituents and letting people know that I'm available.
but not in their
That's
neighborhood.
the reason why I got involved in politics in the first place. Not a joke. Not a joke. Everybody deserves a shot. Everybody deserves a shot. And we've demonstrated, you give them a shot, they step up. They step up in every community. That's why the black community is doing as well as it is now. It's going to do better.
Okay, so
I think that
If it's
Yes.
doing so well, why can't you just go down there?
right, he can no longer, walk through black neighborhoods on foot. And then referring to Lloyd Austin as the black guy, it's like,
I don't know. I just cut JD Vance a break. I'm going to cut Joe Biden a break. He grew up in another time.
right, that's true.
He thinks of himself as a advocate for civil rights, or even though he hasn't been a very good one over the years. I mean, if you look at Joe Biden's actual career, he hasn't necessarily been the greatest advocate for minorities in all American political history. But whatever, this is his self-image now. He's reminiscing. He's confused. He says really inept things. I think he even was aware enough to know he'd stepped in it there, that what he was trying to say was, I can't go there anymore, maybe because I'm president and it's too dangerous. But what he ended up sounding like he said was, hey, those are war zones now. Nobody goes down there,
Right. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to make too much of it, and the whole thing about not remembering Lloyd Austin's name, and look, that happens.
Matt, it's in a few days, this is all going to be memory. Joe Biden's gaffes and illegible memoirs are just going to be a memory, I think.
You think, right? And let's remind everybody also that if he doesn't go, they're going to have to execute a maneuver, and they're going to have to do it pretty quickly. And it's not an uncomplicated thing. So that would require the vice president going. I think the rule is they would have to get a majority of the cabinet to agree that he's incapacitated. Then it has to be voted on by 2/3 of both houses. They have to agree. Then the vice president would have to nominate a new vice president, who would then have to be confirmed by a majority of both houses. So it's not an uncomplicated situation. We're heading into uncharted territory here with what's going to happen with Biden in the next couple of days.
Or we aren't. In some ways, I think we always have to hold out the possibility that they know what they're doing and that they've known what they're going to do. Because we saw a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about this on our weekly broadcast, this notion that there would be a kind of mini primary in which America would be introduced to a few candidates, and there would be celebrity questioners or hosts or moderators, and in some abbreviated fashion, we'd get to kind of semi-choose the next Democratic candidate, or we'd get to weigh in or advise the delegates who do choose. I think that's coming, and I really don't think that this idea that every day we're surprised by Joe getting COVID and it's a new crisis is really true. I think he's been on the way out for a while, and I think they do have a plan.
And that's an interesting thought, that all of this isn't an accident, that they're executing a strategy. I would actually feel better about that if that were the case.
They are projecting chaos, but is it a coincidence that all this is happening the night Donald Trump is speaking? Come on. They lined it up pretty well. In other words, if you're thinking about TV counter programming, they dropped it at exactly the time America is focusing on this. So how accidental and spontaneous is this schedule, really?
Do you want to do a quick look in here? They're doing a little Reagan video during the convention.
Than there was 4 years ago. Is America as respected throughout the world as it was? Do you feel that our security is as safe, that we're as strong as we were 4 years ago?
How about we roll the Hulk Hogan clip instead? What do you think?
4 years is what you would like to see us follow for the next 4.
All right.
Then.
So, Hulk Hogan went on Hannity today, and this is what he said about why he's speaking.
Behind you, you're going to speak to him. I can't wait. This is going to be like body slamming the giant at WrestleMania. What brought you out here? Why are you here? Well, Brett, I got tired of remaining silent. I sat back and watched the borders collapse. I watched the economy collapse. I watched the price of gas, the price of food, everything just do an upside down flip. And when they took a shot at my hero, Donald Trump, I realized that I couldn't be silent anymore. I had to step up. I had to be a real American, just like all these real Americans here in Donald Trump. I have a voice too, and I want people to know it's time to talk. It's time not to be silent anymore. I saw your crowd behind you. You're going to speak.
So there we go.
I can't.
His hero. I don't know. What do you think, Walter?
Hulk breaks his silence. Who would have thought of Hulk as someone who was afraid of
It's Tucker. Tucker's on.
Okay, let's watch. Let's see what he does.
Wow, that's earlier than I thought. Hang on.
I have been to many conventions. I have never been to a more fun convention or a convention with better vibes. They literally let Navarro out of prison. First of all, thank you. This feels a lot different from what I thought it was going to feel like. I can't hear you, but I know it's something good. So I watched the video of what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania about 50 times. I think I was one of about 8 billion people around the world who watched it. And the more I watched it, the more it struck me that everything was different after that moment. Everything. This convention is different. The nation is different. The world is different. Donald Trump is different. When he stood up after being shot in the face, bloodied, and put his hand up, I thought at that moment, that was a transformation. This was no longer a man. Well, I think it was divine intervention. But the effect that it had on Donald Trump, he was no longer just a political party's nominee for a former president or a future president. This was the leader of a nation. And I think there's a difference. I've spent most of my life in Washington, where the president is at the top of the pyramid. Everyone wants to be the president. But if you think about it, the presidency comes with great power, obviously. But if you think about it, that is a title that is bestowed by a process of some sort that can be subverted. And in the end, it does not confer by itself, as no title does, legitimacy. Just because you call yourself the president doesn't mean that much inherently. I can call my dog the CEO of Hewlett Packard. It doesn't mean she is. It's true. And you hate to say it, but it is also true, as a fact, that you could take, a mannequin, a dead person, and make him president. You could. I'm just saying theoretically possible. With enough cheating, that could happen.
Get the joke, Republicans. Come on.
But being a leader is very different. It's not a title. It's organic. You can't name someone a leader. A leader is the bravest man. That's who the leader is. That is true in all human organizations. This is a law of nature. And in that moment, Donald Trump, months before the presidential election, became the leader of this nation. That was the most obvious to me. And I have to say, I think it changed him. reached out to Trump within hours of it that night. And what he said to me that night, having just been shot in the face, he said not a single word about himself. He said only how amazed he was and how proud he was of the crowd, which didn't run. And I thought two
Interesting
things.
that he called him Trump and not
first
the
thing I thought was,
president.
well, of course they didn't run.
Right.
His courage gave them heart. A leader's courage gives courage to his people. And the second thing I thought was, this is the selfish guy I've been hearing about for 9 years. Really, not a word about himself, about his people. Period.
Okay, I'm ready to comment.
And the second thing I noticed, which I
Okay, hang on. Let's just mute it, sort of.
Like, why not?
Okay.
Well, first of all, he doesn't seem to be speaking with the help of a teleprompter. He's just kind of riffing and almost using the audience as a foil. So it's a different way of talking. It's probably pretty compelling TV watching for people who like, especially those who like Tucker. I know the guy. I know Tucker Carlson. He's very close to Trump. Trump has been showing him off as a kind of advisor or adjutant recently at the convention. I think he probably knows him as well as anybody else right now. And that he's stepped into this role that's quasi-journalistic, but post-journalistic in some ways interesting to me. He's not pretending not to be his friend. You know, he's his friend. He likes him. He spends a lot of time with him. I think he has some actual sway over his decision making. I know that to be true. Tucker Carlson is an interesting figure now. He's not a Fox News anchor anymore. He's something between that and a political confidant.
And this is a different role for him. I have to say, I think he's still getting used to what this is. This feels like he's not. I've seen him give speeches, and he's very comfortable doing that. This is a different thing, but let's listen to a little more.
Not just 1 year, but generationally, say for 50 years, then it may be, I don't know what, it's not a democracy. And so I think the entire Trump project, paradoxically, is attacked as an enemy of democracy, is to return democracy to the United States. Hey, let's pay attention to what people actually want. And the lack of interest in that question in Washington is something that ultimately drove me out of the city after 35 years. Lawmakers stepping over the prostrate bodies of their fellow citizens ODing on drugs to go cast votes to send money to some foreign country. Yeah, actually, we've lost more Americans from drugs in the past 4 years than we lost in World War II. Yeah, our bloodiest war, more than we lost in World War II. Does anybody care? It is pathetic. It is pathetic. And do you hear a single word from Washington about doing anything about it? We know where the drugs are coming from. We know the supply routes. The U.S. military spent billions bombing the Ho Chi Minh Trail. You don't see our commander-in-chief suggesting that we use our military to protect our country or the lives of its citizens. No, that's for Ukraine. And it's too much, actually. It's too insulting. It's too insulting. It's a middle finger in the face of every American. It's a very clear statement, which is unmistakable. And that is, we don't care about you. And Donald Trump, whatever you say about him, and I think he's a wonderful person. I know him well. By the way, the funniest person I've ever met in my life, actually. You can't be funny without perspective or without empathy, which is true. But everything else about Trump aside, he actually cares because he's interested in the people who live here because that's his job. A father's job, his duty is to his family. An officer's duty is to his men. A president's duty is to his citizens. And he seems to be the only one who thinks that. And in his choice for vice president, JD Vance, he's made that really clear. JD Vance, I'll say this about him, is a thoroughly decent man, and I'll just admit it, a friend of mine, one of the very few politicians in Washington who actually is very close to his own wife, which is wonderful to see. And she's wonderful, actually. But JD Vance has views that are closer to Trump's voters than anyone else in Washington in office. Therefore, he's the vice president. That's called democracy. So I will stop on just one point, and that is what's happened over the past month since the debate, and particularly on Saturday in Butler. I think a lot of people are wondering, what is this? This doesn't look like politics. Something bigger is going on here. I think even people who don't believe in God are beginning to think, well, maybe there's something to this, actually. And I'm starting to think it's going to be okay, actually. I do think that. In the day after the midterm elections in 2018, Antifa came to my house. The Democratic Party's militia, okay? I was at work. It was obvious when I was at work because it was public. My wife was home alone. They tried to come in through the front door. They terrorized her. She hid in her pantry. It was on television. It was horrible, actually. It was, I mean, I'm not whining about it. It wasn't getting shot in the face, but it wrecked our day. And the next morning, we're lying in bed, and the phone rings for my wife, and it's Donald Trump, who's not like a regular text buddy of Donald Trump's. She picks it up. Hello? Susie, it's Donald Trump. And it's coming through. I could hear it. You know, I'm lying in bed. Whoa. And the first thing he says is, I'm going to stand guard outside your house. And she goes, oh, it's so nice. And he says, I'll never forget this as long as I live. He says, you know, there's a lot of hate out there. And she said, you know, there is, Mr. President. And then he says, but there's a lot of love. There's a lot of love. And we are seeing that love. I don't think it's human love.
Do it, commercial.
And I'll just stop with this. I'm not always convinced that I'm on the right side. I've been on the wrong side many times. You'll never hear me say I'm on God's side or God's with me or even I'm with God. I want to be. Not sure I am. But I will say this unequivocally and conclusively. God is among us right now. And I think that's enough. God bless you.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome golf.
Wow.
So what did you think of that?
Well, the religious angle, you know, that's a side of Tucker I don't know very well. I'm curious about how that went over.
I don't know how it went over, but I got my eye. I have my eye on the comments here, and I can address some things that I see coming up. You know, is that in an authentic speech? Well, if you've decided that Tucker Carlson isn't an authentic person, perhaps, but this is the way the guy is. This is the way he talks. This is the way he is in private. He, a few years ago, it was revealed that he had, you know, weird feelings about Trump. I think some texts came out that were hostile to him or whatever. But they,
oh yeah, they were more than hostile.
Right, but they have been spending a lot of time together, and they have grown to like each other. And I think, and I know for a fact that Tucker Carlson was pivotal in the choice of JD Vance as vice president. Okay, and I happen to know that he went up against his former boss, Rupert Murdoch, who was a Marco Rubio advocate. The advocate of a person who Tucker feels in Rubio, it represents the kind of neocon, warlike interventionist wing of the party, and that choice came out the way it did, I think, to a large degree because of Carlson, and that's why Trump sat him down next to him early in the convention. You know, what else can I say? You can be cynical about this kid who, or you know, young guy, Tucker Carlson, who, you know, is a child of privilege, inherited wealth, and great professional success, being a populist at all. But the feelings and sentiments he's expressing there are not ones that he turns around and laughs at in private. They're the same ones that he talks about.
I'm not cynical about that at all. Yes, Tucker comes from. He's a child of privilege. I guess you can call him that. His parents are both, influential, successful. He didn't grow up in the streets or anything like that, and but unquestionably, in the last 6 to 8 years, he's been an incredibly powerful force in American media. He's defied both the Republican conventional press, like the Fox News sort of party line version of Fox, and the other, the media on the other side. He hasn't fit into either category. He's created his own lane, and he's advocated for some very important things. He's been great on the censorship issue. He's, as you say, he's close to Donald Trump, and I think it's not a secret that he's lobbied Trump on some key issues, sometimes successfully, sometimes not. We know that with he was in there with on Vance, but also he's advocated for Julian Assange, right? And I think his influence over media, he is a truly populist media figure. He's not like an avatar of industrial interests or anything like that, the way an old school network television anchor has been. He's been a truly independent figure, and it's one of the reasons why he's come under a lot of fire. And
he's also a very close friend of RFK Jr. I think anybody who's studied the matter probably knows that, but if that surprises anyone, fine. And I think he's been a bridge to some extent between the two figures. There's some relationship between Trump and RFK anyway, but I think I think Tucker is somebody who is friends to them both and sometimes gets them to talk.
Yeah, and I think Tucker is. I think we both feel this way. He's ardently anti-war in a very interesting way. I think that's maybe the strongest thing about him, maybe.
I think that's an aspect of this convention that's not being, and of this ticket that's not being properly weighted in Trump and Vance, and in this sort of lieutenant advisor Tucker Carlson. You have Republicans who are very skeptical about war. At least the wars we've been in recently. And that puts them at odds with very powerful forces. And you can be cynical about everybody feeding the same system, and maybe they do. But there are some real differences. And you've got a collection here of probably some of actually most controversial believers in as far as our military posture right now.
So I thought the part of the speech that was most effective was the thing about it's too much, it's too insulting. That whole the idea that we have to spend billions of dollars, whether it's in Ukraine or bombing the Ho Chi Minh Trail or this has been a consistent feature of American life for how long? Since World War II, practically, right? This incredibly expensive effort to intervene, often militarily in every corner of the world, paying both in sort of treasure and blood, right, as they say, right? So young American lives, men and women coming back, they're never the same. They come back and they have lousy VA, service. They're injured. They have terrible trouble getting good jobs. You talked about the Uber drivers that we've had, right? Like, you go to any part of the country, you're going to run into veterans and driving Uber,
Yeah.
or who've have had a hard time. And look, this is one of the first things I noticed about Trump in 2016, and it was seldom reported on very much, but as the campaign started to progress, you saw more and more people in army fatigues at his events, and Trump did very well in regions where there were a lot of returning veterans. He started to talk about forever wars more and more, and whether you believe he's sincere or not, this is the rhetoric of this campaign. We're against.
And the vice president is a U.S. A former U.S. Marine. And there's a joke, a horrible joke I heard that I have to repeat here, that the closest a Marine has ever gotten to the Oval Office is Lee Harvey Oswald. Because, in fact, there has never been a Marine who's been president or vice president.
Right.
And so it's interesting that rather than some polished Mike Pence figure, we now have somebody who was in these forever wars. This is the first of our presidential or vice presidential candidates who actually participated in this last 20-something years of wars and the Great War on Terror, or whatever they're going to call it.
That's right. Yes. I mean, Kerry was a Vietnam vet, obviously. Yep. McCain was a Vietnam vet. They had differing views, obviously, about that war. But this latest incarnation, the war on terror vets, Tulsi ran in the last cycle, was sort of brutally suppressed by people in her own party to the point where she's no longer in the party, really. And then Vance, being on the ticket, I think it's an important thing, and for this rhetoric to come out now, Vance didn't talk a whole lot about that last night, which I thought was interesting. We talked with Michael Tracy yesterday, who made a point of noting that both Vance and Trump at different times have been in favor of sending weapons to Ukraine. They haven't been like active, ardent opponents of the war, but the vibe of this campaign, the language of this campaign, and going back to 2016, has been about ending these forever wars, that they're a bad deal for America, which they are, right? I mean, unquestionably, it's been stupid. It's reduced our prestige abroad. People hate us all over the world. It's increased our risk to things like terrorism 100-fold, right? And it is too much. I totally agree with Tucker on that, and I think a lot of people do. And it's amazing that this is coming from a Republican convention and not a Democratic convention. They kind of abandoned that. The Democrats have been a party full of people who supported the Iraq War, and they've worked very hard to keep opponents of Iraq, Afghanistan, all those things out of presidential contention. So this is great. I'm all for it, and I think that was a great line.
Yeah, I had a friend who was an Army captain, a West Pointer, and came back after numerous tours in Iraq, and some real gnarly things happened. I mean, friendly fire accidents among the guys he led, really frustrating engagements, and some terribly bloody ones. And he was driving around right after having landed in America. He's about to get out. And, I don't know, they muster out in Texas. And he called me on his cell phone. And he said, "Man, it was all bullshit. It was all bullshit. I don't know why we were over there." This is a West Point captain in the Army. And he was crying. And that was back, before 2010. That was maybe about 2008. And I've heard that story so many times, and I've known so many people who feel that way. And it's got to have some reflection in our politics. Come on. We just can't keep sailing away on this billowing rhetoric about this and that, the international and rules-based order, etc. It has taken a toll on the country. It's taken a toll on other countries, maybe an even greater one.
Oh, a massive toll.
A much more murderous and damaging toll. And we've got to get real about it. And our politicians haven't been doing it at all. So if it looks like JD Vance and Donald Trump want to take a stab at starting to get real about it, I'm all for it.
Yeah, we haven't gotten real about it. I mean, you go back to Vietnam, the Agent Orange. Think about the continuing kind of devastation that caused for a whole generation of people in that country. The psychic trauma of the people who came back who fought that war. I'm still affected, by documentaries about Vietnam that I saw when I was younger, and then having gone to Iraq and seeing how stupid that entire effort was, and what an enormous waste of both resources and just the casual way with which we destroyed another country and risked the lives of our own citizens. That stuff trickles down, it ripples out into society, and it's part of this sort of epic mistrust of American institutions. You can only go back and watch Band of Brothers so many times before we run out of belief in the essential goodness of the American mission. I think we're there, right? And this is the point. Hopefully, it's an inflection point, because I thought it was going to come. By the way, that's part of the reason why I thought Barack Obama did so well in 2008, is because there was a strong desire to reject the war on terror back then, and it didn't happen. And so we still have to do it, So I don't know. Anyway,
well, I think the choice that we make this fall for president may determine whether or not American troops end up in Ukraine or not. In other words, I think there is a real fork in the road coming in terms of at least how that conflict is prosecuted. And at this point, it looks more likely that a Democratic candidate will lead us to the troops in Ukraine prospect than these Republican candidates, just by listening to them and examining their records.
Yeah. And people are saying, Matt and Walter are on board with Trump and Vance. I don't know if I'm ready to say that. But I'll tell you what I am on board with is I'm on board with any language that's against these policies, and I'm disappointed in the absence of it on the other side. So
I'm not. I want to speak for anybody who listens to this podcast for now and forever. You're never going to hear who I vote for, and I'm never going to tell you.
Exactly.
That's not my job. I will sometimes make the case for certain people and their policies in a hypothetical way, or attempt to analyze their appeal. But I'm not here to rah-rah anybody. And I draw a fairly bold and serious line around that, frankly, because I'd like to have my credibility 5 years from now.
Right, and that's why it is a big step for Tucker to go on that stage, because it's a step away from something, right? So, it's one that he's made that choice. That's it's an interesting choice, and he's an extremely influential person. And I'm glad that he's advocating for certain things, which
it's an evolution past journalism, and I'm going to stay here. I think American media has just gone so far in the direction of advocacy, and I've never once met any of these characters who I couldn't make a strong case against after getting to know them a little bit.
Right.
But you know, some of them are, but they do represent tendencies in the country, and some of them represent issues that I care deeply about far better than others. And when that happens, I'll note the fact.
Right. Yeah, I feel the same way. I mean, I spent a lot of time around Bernie Sanders in 2005, 2006, and I had there were a lot of things I liked about a lot of things. You know, he took me on a tour of Congress. He wanted to show people exactly how it worked. He never went off the record with me. You know, showed me how the Rules Committee worked, and he thought it was his part of his job as an elected official to show people exactly how the whole thing worked. That was really remarkable. How many politicians would do that, right? Doesn't mean I love everything about Bernie Sanders, but I'm allowed to express admiration for certain things. It's not, you know, necessarily an endorsement, or I'm campaigning for him. But you know, this campaign is it's just what's happening with this populist thing. It had to come out somewhere, right?
Yeah.
There's a rejection of this whole sort of militaristic neoliberal project that is going to come out one way or the other, and so I'm sort of in favor of it coming out, you know, wherever it does, and
well, I think we're both in favor of as many real energies being released into the atmosphere as possible, and as many legitimate points of view being allowed to contend as possible in as free as possible a way. And you know, we're narrating a game. We're narrating a baseball game, and we're not home team color commentators. We're network commentators in the sense that, you know, we don't. It's not go Yankees or whatever. But it's important to note when you feel something genuine or new or important has been said. And we make predictions and so on. But, you know, I will say this, that if I was the kind of person who, you know, expressed their preferences openly and sort of threw off this journalistic ethic that I happen to hold to, I might be more willing to do it this time if I liked Donald Trump than I did before. I think it's a more interesting campaign that coincides with issues that I feel are important in a more constructive way than in the past.
I totally agree with that, and part of the reason for that I agree with you is because in the last 8 years, the Democratic Party has turned into something that frankly freaks me out on many levels, not just on the militarism side, but on the sort of authoritarianism side, the sort of opposition to civil liberties, the undermining of it, and to the extent that I have sympathy for the Trump campaign, it's more like a kind of curiosity. Is it going to turn out to be a real opposition to that or not? Right?
Yeah.
There's a part of me that thinks maybe it is, right? Like maybe he'll turn out. Maybe this will be the kind of force that helps roll all this crap back. But maybe not. You have to have your eyes open for that. I mean, we've seen, you know, Trump did come out and support that horrible FISA expansion bill that just went through earlier this year, and that was kind of shocking to me, right? Like when I saw that.
There are a couple things that I can say, you know, before we sign off. Last night I was on TV on the Greg Gutfeld show, and the guest of honor was Vivek Ramaswamy. Got to talk with him briefly. And it seems that he sort of talked Trump into becoming Bitcoin positive, and also talked him into opposing the TikTok ban, something that he had been for in the past. My impression of Vivek, who I called an AI a couple of nights ago on the air here,
we had to be like,
was more positive in person. I think TV renders his perfection a little too perfect, but he's an incredibly bright person, eloquent in a way that I think few are. On his, speaks on his feet as well as anybody I've ever met. And his line on Trump was that Trump likes to learn, and it sounds as though a little seminar on Bitcoin turned Trump crypto positive, and that was confirmed by another big Bitcoin media figure who I spoke to today. So, we haven't talked about that, but there is a way in which Trump, I think, is winning over these single issue Bitcoin voters who represent a small but I think incredibly dynamic segment of culture right now. And it's interesting that Trump has claimed them first.
Yeah. I think that's absolutely right. Somebody just said Vivek is a fast-talking huckster. I don't think that's true. He's fast-talking, though. I'll say that. I talked with him at length last night. It was all, we were off the record, so I can't get into it. But what I can say is I've talked to a lot of politicians in my life, and I can't remember having the experience of having a tough time keeping up with one. There have been a few who are very smart, but not many that throw so much at you so quickly that it's tough to keep up. But we're in this interesting place where the old archetypes of left and right have completely collapsed, and nobody really knows where anybody stands on certain issues anymore. You mentioned the TikTok ban. On the Trump side, there are arguments for and against that, right? Within the Republican Party, the traditional capitalist view of that would be no way, right? Or the traditional libertarian view of that would be kind of no way. But there's also this kind of, crypto nationalist populist idea, protectionism, tariffs. We just don't know what this is going to look like ultimately yet. So it's hard to be, for it or against it in any way. For me, it's just sort of an unfolding story about something that is rising up in opposition to something that we know we have a wealth of data about going back 50 years that is now worsening significantly, right? So is this something new or not? I mean, that's kind of what the story boils down to for me.
Well, the aside was just because we're supposed to deliver a little news every once in a while, and we did get to speak to him, and I think we were both impressed by his facility and his intensity. The guy wants to talk, man. He wants to put over his ideas. He seeks out opportunities to do it. He wasn't particularly selling anything. He reminds me of somebody in college who just really intensely needs to be discussing ideas a lot.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. We've all been at the party with the parties with the person who's like an inch too close. They've had a few. No, but he's actually maybe the most sober person I've met recently, right? But he's just very fast in the way he talks, very intense.
Yeah.
And he's got a lot of really interesting ideas. I had to kind of sit down and think about, that's interesting. That's interesting. It's just stuff that needs to be worked out. That's what's kind of this whole convention has been like that. There's this weird collection of people there are a few old school Republicans that you would have seen in, a 2004 Republican convention. A few, but a lot of this there are different strands of libertarianism, nationalism, populism, civil libertarianism. Right?
Mhm.
There's that here also. It's interesting, I would say. I want to thank Tyler for saying that. I don't know which one of us was Hunter and which one of us was Mark Twain, but excessive compliment, but we appreciate it nonetheless. We're having a lot of fun talking with all of you. Actually, I want to ask the people in the audience, like, what's your thought about how this convention has gone? Like, do you think it's been a good look for the Republicans for the Trump campaign? What do you like about it? What do you not like about it? We've talked to a lot of people here, but most of these people are committed Republicans, so we can kind of guess how they feel about most things. But what do you folks think about it? I'm interested to hear what your comments are. Let's see what we have here. Meanwhile, there's a rumor that the next speaker is going to be Hulk Hogan, so we should just hang out and see if that's the case. Somebody's playing music at the moment, but let's see. Here we go. Someone.
Well, you sort of say the magic word when you say Bitcoin, because I noticed a lot of people really want to speak their mind about it. I think I think the future of this kind of blockchain trust-based technology is very important to a lot of people, and they see it as a way out of all kinds of binds that we're in currently. And again, I'll say I think Trump has taken ownership of the issue.
Yep, absolutely. So these comments are all really kind of. I've had a lot of these same thoughts. Sean O'Brien was a high point. That was a super interesting moment. Like, it was very. It's so rare that you have something that comes off that's as different from what you would expect at a place like this. Amy,
people said production has been great. I agree on that, and I've heard that from a lot of people who've watched it and been involved with it and can compare it to past conventions.
Mm-hmm. I feel awkward liking it. I totally understand that. Sorry, Matt. Well, Walter is the Twain among you. Okay, conceded. I think that's true too. Here we go. This has been the craziest 10 days in my memory. It's hard to focus on anything these days. That's true too. It's kind of overwhelming. Somebody else said they're still processing, which is kind of how I feel about it also. Like, there's just so much information. You just don't know what to think.
Yeah.
And whereas I do know what I think about the Democratic side. So,
I'll tell you what. I'm looking forward to Trump's speech, and I'll explain why. Donald Trump, no matter what you think or what Joy Reid thinks, was almost assassinated on Saturday, and it's now Thursday, a few days later, and he's going to give a speech after having been pretty quiet in the meantime. A loud guy has sat there like the Buddha and, listened and not spoken. Tonight, he's going to come back out and start to speak. The theme is the coming American golden age. So we have a clue about it being a positive speech rather than, some sort of screed or Jeremiah about how bad Biden's America is.
But it's going to be changed, right? He's changed it.
Right. For this speech, he has no precedent. There is no, I think, parallel moment in American history when a former president who has survived an assassination attempt at a moment of incredible suspense and tension comes out to try to articulate a new vision and a way out of great difficulty. If he manages to do that, it will be without a model. He will become the model for that. It's a huge challenge. There's nothing to copy.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, so it's going to be coming up later. So I guess this is probably a good time to sort of wind down and say our plan is to watch the speech and then find a way to set up and do a quick recap of Trump's speech, because we want to be in the building, to feel what the actual crowd is going through. There's Brick Suit is up there.
If I did nothing else this week, I introduced our listeners to the Brick Suit persona, and
yeah, Brick Suit is a totally interesting dude. That was really funny. And yeah, so we want to experience this in the hall, and then we'll find a way to do a quick recap, and then that'll probably be it for this whole thing. But so we'll see y'all folks all later. We'll make an announcement on Twitter and hopefully on Rocket as well, about when we're going to be back. And it may be super quick. It may be guerrilla. It may be on our phones. But we'll do a little wrap up. And thanks everybody for turning out. Another great turnout, 35,000 folks, and this has been fun. So Walter, let's pack up and get over to the hall.
okay, let's do it.
All right, take care, everybody.